we are good. I've been told that we're right to go, and we'll do that. Firstly, thank you for your attendance at the 5th consultation session with the Pines tag Stromlo interaction with council. I apologise to the community for the lack of a live stream at this point in time. It's an issue that we're finding. However, as we will provide in a postscript on our Facebook and socials, that will provide the recorded version of the meeting to the public as soon as possible. Just by way of procedure, prior to the start of this meeting, there was an undertaking by Stromlo Tag to update the questions and answers to the questions that have been asked by the community and councillors, and they will be updated on the website owned by the Pines. Yes. So with that in mind, I hope that is enough procedural stuff, and we can get into the juicy stuff. Andrew, thank you for coming along. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Gary, and well, welcome to those that are online, I guess, post after the meeting. Today we've got a pretty simple agenda. We're going to give a very short update run by Joanna on the progress since the last meeting in December. And with the holiday period, you won't be surprised. It's not an enormous amount of update there, but we do have a very interesting announcement today to start. We're quite excited to make, and we brought some additional people on today to be available to answer questions and share what we're trying to do. And then I think after that, we'll go to the Q&A from the written Q&A. So without further ado, I'll ask Joanne to come up and give the update on development status.
Okay. As available, so go to this app, which is page 3 on the slides. So the main update is that we now have 3 160-meter monitoring masts installed. So that's the newest update since last time. We've now completed 3 out of 8 burn and bat utilization surveys. So as you know, that has to be undertaken over a period of 2 full years. So we've now completed the 3rd summer season. We've continued to talk to private infrastructure hosts. So these are people who are interested in potentially hosting infrastructure, including wind turbines on their properties. And we will look to release a public map in the next few months showing which properties these would be. So currently the map on our website is the one released in October 2024. So that's currently not up to date, but in the next few months we would look to update that. We also hosted an information stall at the Oberon show in February. So that was quite good. Thanks, Glenn, for helping us with that. We commenced work on quarry accommodation, waste and water strategies. So that is still in the early stages, but thank you, Gary, also for facilitating a meeting with your staff. And there'll be future meetings to come. We've had more than 3,800 engagements to date with the community. So we are continuing our engagement one-on-one in small groups and through events such as the Oberon show. And we've had just our 4th round of sponsorship close. So that was another $25,000 for the community. We've had a record 12 applications this time. So we're currently going through and assessing those. We're up to $23,000 in electricity bill credits. So those are coming through and continuing, and the community is welcome to continue to apply to that. And of course, Glenn, who's in the back, who's our legacy project coordinator, and the committee applications are open currently. So members of the public are welcome to apply to those.
All right, Joanna, can we ask questions as you go through?
Yeah.
So last meeting, I think the consensus with council majority was that the legacy project would be best run by council rather than an independent body, and we were following it on advice from other councils and other in res zones, and we put that suggestion to you. So obviously, have you give that consideration, whether or not for probity, you know, for just transparency, for management? Our council, our mayor was very strong about that. That should be in our hands. Have you had any more consideration about that?
I believe that was also a question in your information. or in the questions that came through. So this is based on
Yeah,
questions
I
that
put,
came through on the 3rd of March, but also on the 9th of or 8th of December.
I'll let you keep going. I'll go back to my question later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we answer it together at that.
Oh, we can do it later.
Yeah. I'll let you finish.
No, that's okay. That was the only slide I had. So that's the update really since the last meeting.
I'll take it over from there. So the next slides, and just before we go, I'm not sure if they're being shared on the system or not.
So what I propose to do, Andrew, is just take the PDF of that and include it
Okay.
in the recording. We don't have that recording, those slides at this point in time.
I see, okay.
So
It was,
I think-
it was there earlier. It was there earlier.
I'm not going to touch it because what we're doing now is in fact recording the meeting. All I'll say is I think Joe said it well. Look at page 3 of
Yeah,
the,
no problem.
you know, page 4 of
No
it.
problem.
We'll just try and work our way through
And maybe
as
before we,
systematic as we can.
thank you. Maybe before we started the slides, I'll just take us back about 2 or 3 meetings ago. 2 or 3 meetings ago, we had some discussion, I guess, around what types of benefits we could bring to the community. And there was some suggestions that sort of sparked our imagination on council's own community housing program. There was some, not main subject of discussion, but it was mentioned. And then I think again, in the September update, there's some specific, Councillor Hayden, I think you actually made some comments at the time. And at the time, I indicated that we were working on something that we shared an ambition to do something, but we couldn't launch it at that time. So today, we're very pleased to launch what we're pretty sure is an Australian first. And what that is the Pines will actually donate funds to enable a 100-bed/50 house permanent affordable housing program for the Oberon Council area. And the mechanics of that is this will actually form part of the workforce accommodation strategy. So for the first period of construction, we'll use those homes, and I use that word very deliberately, they're homes. Driving down the street, as Charles likes to remind me, I'll introduce Charles in a moment, remind me that these will look like any other homes. This is no different. Then at the end of the construction period, they will transition over to affordable housing. Owned, operated, managed all the while by our partners at Blue CHP. So what we're announcing is that we've created a partnership with Blue CHP to do that for us. The Pines makes some very specific language here, a charitable donation to Blue CHP, which enables then the construction to occur. And you'll see in the slides, we talk about it as a mixture of upfront and ongoing commitment to allow that to happen. We worked together over the last months to work out the economics of it, the benefits for the project. You know, it's costing a little more to do it than just if we did it in only a workforce accommodation. But that's the kind of, you know, the benefits that regional communities should have for hosting farms. We hope that it's innovative enough that we can also share it with the rest of the industry. And we'll be advocating, you'll see some press release over this week from the industry where we're going to lean in and share what we've developed together in order to inspire others to do the same thing around their projects. It's the very beginning of the process. You know, sometimes when you make these announcements, you want to have your council arm in arm with you at the time, but we've sort of had to work out the economics of it, the partnering of it, how it can work. And then I think today is the beginning of about a 2-year process between now and might have permits to consult, to work with council staff, councillors, the broader, you know, more stakeholders in the community about what it should look like for Oberon and what it should not look like as well, as this is important to say. It's really, really motivating for this team. You can see the group that we've got with us, everyone's put a lot of energy in to get us to where we are. And we're very more than happy to, you know, answer the questions, understand what it is and what it isn't. You know, for us as a developer to innovate this way and bring the industry, it's a reaction to what we've heard in the community. It's more than a reaction. We think it's directly addressing your draft housing strategy from November. We would like to think that the partnership we have with Blue CHP changes and evolves into a primary relationship between maybe Blue CHP and Oberon Council, and the Pines being just one part of what Blue CHP could do in the region. So it's an introductory almost, and we'll contribute our part. But maybe there's a broader relationship that can evolve from us. Councillor Levis?
Yeah, just a question. Do you anticipate that to be closer to the construction site or town? So,
Yeah, no, we think, and beginning consultation.
Yeah.
We think that the right location for those affordable housing, and I'll introduce Charles here at this part to also speak to some of the definitional side of what we mean by affordable housing versus. Workforce camp, which will also be eventually worked out exactly where, and not impacting council or other infrastructure. That standalone camp will definitely be closer. But we think at this stage, the right solution for the permanent housing is here amongst the facility, the community in a salt and pepper fashion, if I can borrow Charles' language on that one.
Can I ask a question? Where is the land you're going to build 100 beds?
Yeah, so we haven't, Councillor Lee, we haven't worked that out yet. We do know, we've done a good survey of the site, and maybe the team from Blue CHP.
So you're announcing it, but you haven't got the land, you haven't got permission,
Not
council,
yeah, none of
but
that.
you're announcing it.
We have to go through a period of consultation,
Okay.
identify land that people are interested to participate, and then go through the normal council approvals.
It's be interesting to see where you're going to build 100 beds here, around here.
Well, that might be a good segue to the team at Blue CHP to introduce what they do and how they approach that. So Charles, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors and everybody for having me here and my team here today. Nearly 30 years ago, I used to come up to Oberon quite consistently because I used to work for Boral Timber. And I was the CFO of the timber division for Boral, and used to come up here and do stock takes in the snow and that sort of thing. So I know the area semi-well, and my other passion is fly fishing as well. So it's a pretty renowned area up here, though. As you know by my accent, I normally go to across the ditch and do that, and I've just come back for last weekend. So look, Blue Chip, just a little bit about, or Blue CHP, we use both names interchangeably. We were set up roughly 17 years ago. We had $5 million worth of seed money, and over time we've expanded the business to now we're building property and housing in Cairns and right around the eastern seaboard to Adelaide. We build social, affordable and specialist disability accommodation. Our core competence is in doing property development. We then outsource tenancy management to other local CHPs. That's our national go local type model that we do. It's been very, very successful. We now have an asset base of nearly $700 million worth of property across the nation, and we're continuing to grow that business. My team I have here today, Gareth Bird, who's based in Sydney, planner by background and very experienced in terms of getting and working with councils through the process we do. And George Giannis, who actually has a building license as well, but he's based in Brisbane. But George is really the key. How do you make the financial models work? So we have a team that we work through. How do we actually put all the various bits together? So the initial phase of the discussions and working through to get an MOU with the TAG Energy to then start the process, and the next steps are then to start consulting with yourselves and work through a process. Where do we put this housing? Understand what are the local requirements in terms of what are the needs? Because you've got to build the wind farm, but the second part is this is in perpetuity. So we need to make sure that we're building not only for today, but actually over the longer term, the type of housing that we're building that's appropriate. I mean, obviously, I know it gets pretty cold here in winter, so you want to make sure it's got plenty of insulation, double glazing, and all those sorts of things, as now the building standards now ask us to do. So there's a real process that you work through that. We're very experienced. We're doing something in slightly different, but the same, an urban renewal in Tolland and Wagga. So we do understand regional New South Wales. We work a lot in regional Queensland as well. So we do work extremely closely with councils because obviously, as you are now well aware, in the mandates of the state government and the federal government is to get more housing, part of your housing plan. So we understand that process and we work closely with you as we move forward. So that's where we are right now. My team have really put together and worked very closely here to get something to get and where we need to announce today. And then it's a process to work our way through over the next couple of years to get that stuff on the ground.
So can I just ask a question? I do know a little bit about you. I have sort of read about you.
Oh, that's very nice.
Sometimes I'm a bit of a poke up information and that, but you tend to you do specialise in disability.
Yes, we do. We have a division. So we, as I said, we have three parts of the housing. So you have the social and affordable housing and then the specialist disability accommodation, which is highly specialised in terms of the type of clients that are under the NDIS scheme. And we provide that housing as well.
So we're not talking about that sort of housing.
No.
So we're talking about normal housing.
Normal housing.
Then flipped into affordable, and then they would have to meet a criteria.
That's right.
With you to be accepted into that.
Yeah, so just for the benefit, I'll just answer this question in a little more detail. There are standard affordable housing guidelines that are published by the Minister of Housing, Rose Jackson. So they're sort of the template that you use for housing. And then we look at what is the demographic? Is there a huge need for people over 55?
Yeah.
Is there young mothers, single mothers with babies? How do we look at integrating? That's the magic sauce that you try and bring to society. You know, if there's a single older person there, can they work and build a little bit of community to support each other? Those are the things that we really try and think about, design and structure that goes over time.
That sort of fits for us because we have an ageing population.
Correct.
And they live out on properties, large properties, and they have to potentially come into town because they can't do the drive. And we only, council already have built independent living units, but we can't keep building. So,
Absolutely.
and that's sort of definitely a market that would be.
So if I give you an example, you might have read on our website, we've worked a transaction with Mackay Regional Council, and they had their own community housing organisation and funded by the state government. The state government policy in Queensland has been for the councils to exit housing. It's not their speciality.
No.
So that's where it goes into community housing. We consummated this transaction where we took over about 140 dwellings. We now are investing in building new stock. So the council provided us some land and we've actually got the DAs done and we're actually commencing construction with those sorts of things. So you start to build a momentum because you start to know the local area and then it grows from there.
Councillor Hayden, then Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank Andrew for pushing through with this plan and getting Blue Chip on board. After attending the last 3 years of rural summits in Sydney, one of the major conversations that's been pushed by ministers is councils need to provide affordable housing and find a partner that will help them deliver those projects. Being out here at Oberon, of course, we have hit a brick wall because there's been no one that has been willing to partner with the council to try and deliver these types of projects for us to be able to apply to get these grants. So it's kind of stymied us in that avenue. The project here that's listed, like the plan of that, is absolutely brilliant because what is needed in Oberon is affordable housing in the rental market. Also, people would like some smaller units and give up some of their backyards, and they're not aged people, they're people in their 40s and 50s that are sick of mowing and that work all day. But, you know, then you do have a lot of single parents and you have single individuals. You know, I've always thought in the background 2 and 3 bedroom homes are what's required and then a couple of units somewhere. But I'm just really impressed to see this. Andrew knows how keen I am with this, and I really hope that you guys can stick with it and work with council to deliver this.
I'll give you one answer that we do stick with processes and what we go through. We don't give up. It's a hard business that we're in. It really is a tough because the margin's so small. when we're doing, government housing, like the team of, at the moment, we've got about 500 dwellings on the go in Queensland because the state government is funding those processes. We're just finishing nearly 300 in Victoria. New South Wales is a little bit slow. The 6 billion that they've got, we haven't really seen it start to flow. But creating these engagements with council is absolutely vital, because if you engage and we get working together, then you've got more doors that open.
And as you know, we've got the manufacturing production of most
No, very well.
product.
Oh, very well.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Charles. Just two questions. The first one's a brief one. Have you got any other projects in a wind farm area?
Not at this stage. This is the first. Yeah.
So today's announcement, wonderful concept, wonderful concept. On reflection, there's a bit of a balance, but over the weekend, I spent 2 days in our neighbouring LGA, Upper Lachlan. Upper Lachlan is often called the scent capital of Australia, wind farm capital of Australia. It has over 350 towers. You would call it a mature wind farm area. They're still developing it. Now, it's also a sister city to us in that we've got a distance to Bathurst, they've got a distance to Goulburn, so it's sort of comparable, similar sized towns, okay? So I was down there for 2 days, just looking around the countryside, meeting people. 40 years ago, that town was vibrant because I went for a job there. It was unbelievably vibrant. 3 pubs, all the shops full. At the moment, I'm being conservative. There's 20 empty shops up the main street. There's hardly a car on the main street on a Saturday. And not one office or building was taken by a wind farm developer as an office. The place is dead. Now that's a mature wind farm area. It's died. And it's great, the announcement. It's where we're going with this. Do we end up like Crookle, where once a vibrant town, once full employment, once all the shops full, once 3 pubs, and now dead as a doornail? I mean, we go down that track, we can, and it's great what you're looking at, but it's the future. It's our economy.
So let me answer that question, not so much from a blue chip point of view, but sort of my global experience of working all over the world. I've seen the same thing in the US, the Rust Belts. I've seen it through Europe, where places have been disaggregated. Now, that's a function of global economics, and we've seen a lot going on in global economics pretty recently with tariffs and stuff going globally, changes and that sort of thing. So there's some forces that have changed that are way beyond all of our control. So what are we doing here in Oberon? If I look at some of the things that I look at Oberon, and bear with me because I look at a lot of different places, so I don't know all. But first of all, you've got a timber mill here. So that's, first of all, that's a base for manufacturing jobs. It's a bit like when I look at Campbelltown, we have a manufacturing sector and we have a railway. We've got to use what assets we've got. Unfortunately, we've got Genolan Caves closed, and it's been closed because of the road for quite some time, which slows down tourist traffic. What else can we offer? What we're looking to do when we look at our businesses and bring them here, once you create housing and permanent affordable housing, you start putting more dollars through the local economy.
Absolutely, and I don't disagree with that, but what you're missing is in the most mature, the largest wind farm area, if ever there was going to be a little town, it's only a little town that would be prosperous, it would be Crookle.
So
where there's been no prosperity gain from that wind town.
So this is what this is working with Pines is what's really different.
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
No, I'm not
I'm saying
disagreeing.
we can go down a path
Yep.
where our town withers and dies, and you've done a great project. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but that's not the
I'll leave it at
objective.
that. No, I know that.
Can I just add to that really quickly? Oberon and Crookle are very different in their dynamics. We had the pine forest, they had potatoes. The potatoes, the trees kind of fell apart, and it's a very different population.
Thank you. We'll take it on to, Charles, thank you. It is quite daunting from someone in my position, seeing that someone wants to come and put potentially 50+ new dwellings in your local government area. It has many interesting concepts attached to it, including how do we service it and all that sort of good stuff that
Absolutely.
we've got no doubt that we'll be talking about in the future if this thing progresses. So thank you. I do have a background in building and planning. Just for the community online and certainly for council, you've talked about affordable, you've talked about community. Do you want from your perspective, just the definitions of how the two things are different? Just so we've got a record of what that means, because is it bringing social housing to Oberon? Is it bringing cheap housing to Oberon? What is the concept around affordable housing versus community housing?
So let me break. So affordable housing in the definitional terms, it really talks about rental housing at 75% of market rate. And that's driven by the ATO tax rules. And it generally works at about 30% of income. That's generally the ministerial guidelines. Now, there could be some elements of social housing that we could weave into this if that's what makes financial sense to do. It won't be a large portion, but there are vulnerable people in your community that need housing. Solo mothers, aging people who have suffered divorce, particularly mums. So we will look at how part of the economics, and this is part of working through what type of typology of housing, how do we mix it all together? Can I say to you, I've been now doing this for, now 15, 16 years. What we do, and if you ever, when you drive down the mountain and want to sort of turn left at Penrith and go to Jordan Springs Sports Crossing, let us know and we'll tell you where our houses are. You will not know the difference. So we integrate our housing to look just like everything else. And that's really important, because if you're a single mum and your kid goes to school, you want that kid to be proud to take their friends back to your home. That's my home. And that's the difference that we try to make. So we'll try and integrate that. We'll work with you as a council, how we manage those mixes as we go forward. But community housing is really a generic term that covers all of the housing that we provide in a broader sense. And it all comes under that affordable banner. So the terms are used a little bit interchangeably. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation. Very exciting.
It is, absolutely.
Interesting to see how it progresses over time. Oh, Councillor Tuck, sorry, I was wrapping up.
So if I understand correctly, you wouldn't be looking at buying existing housing, it would all be new housing.
Increase the supply.
Yeah, and it wouldn't all be like a mass development all in the one spot.
No.
When you said salt and pepper, that means you'd be buying vacant blocks.
Yeah.
In various locations around town.
Yeah.
And building various types of housing on those vacant blocks.
Yeah. There's some derelict house there that makes sense to look over, we do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the last meeting 3 months ago, I remember asking a question about possible workforce needs. And I understand that it's going to go up and down and vary during the course of the project. But the rough figure that was mentioned was up to a peak of potentially 500 workers at the maximum. Is that where what you said about the 100 is only what you would locate in town, and there would be a separate temporary accommodation closer?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all that remains about a peak of about 500 if you include the work like to connect into the existing grid plus building the wind farm. This base of 100, we see it like in all of our projects in the industry. Typically, the management functions take up the housing in and around the available rental market. So what we're trying to address here is providing high quality management housing, so we don't take the rental market out. Attract great employees, that's one thing. There's a very competitive market for the workforce. So, we think that this strategy actually provides some real interesting synergies there to attract the right type of employees who see, wow, this is a brand new place for me to move in, it's taken care of. I want to work on that project. Yeah. And then as we get and we go through that ramp up to the, it's very peaky. It doesn't last at 500 for very long. Once the electricity starts to be exported, but the first electricity, it starts to fall away. And so what we'll do, and we'll be doing some public work on this, we'll bring those obligations to basically rent the facilities from Blue CHP to the winning contractors who actually build the wind farm for us. So part of our procurement strategy will be to say, and we will take 40 of these places, and you will take 40 and you will take 20. Well, you know, we'll work with them between now and then to
But
to
you
get the
don't
right
have a
numbers.
location for that.
Correct, and this is gonna be, you know, we want to be able to attract that great workforce. Not put the housing rental pressure into the community. And then for the bulk of the workforce, the permanent worker accommodation style camps, which are well, and to speak very openly, the cost of those is approaching the cost of new build. And so there's an arbitrage here that we've identified to take advantage of, actually.
But there's a question, when you talk about the camp,
Yes.
and you do some of the housing here, what's happened in another council area is they don't want to live in that, so they come back into the town because they want the entertainment,
Yeah, indeed.
the social
Yeah, and
community,
that's a very.
and then they do suck up your available rental accommodation. So even though you're saying you'll build out of town, doesn't necessarily get built unless you are obliged to make sure they use that accommodation.
And it's precisely why we're doing it that way, while we're putting those obligations down into the supply chain to take it up. And because it's the early ones, or let's say the management ones, I think you'll find you'll be happy with those that are gonna make use of these particular permanent.
It's just a
houses.
question around, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't make people live where they don't want to live. They'll find other ways to where they'll be, and the town will always be the most popular location.
Yeah, correct, and hence another good reason to have that housing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charles, just before we move on, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Leverers, and then I'll finish off with one.
Confirm the ownership of these houses?
Blue Chip will own them.
Yep.
We make a donation, the project will make a donation.
Yep.
But all the time owned by Blue Chip.
Yep.
Just a quick question, design styles, Blue Chip have how many different designs?
Oh.
Appeasing the
That's how.
planner and the builder in me that says that the last thing we want is 50 houses of exactly the same
No.
shape, size and
No, so we'll look at, so every block that we acquire will have its own peculiarities, which will then lend itself to what design that we'll put on that. So we will most probably do what we call a bit of hybrid production. So maybe the bathrooms and that sort of thing, we might use a manufacture process that we drop into the construction. But obviously the way you look at roofs, you've got to deal with snow and you've got to deal with other different things. So you're trying to make sure the last thing you want is a roof like that and the snow just sits in the middle and everything leaks up.
And the brick
That's right.
design outside. Yeah.
just for clarity, that sorts itself out. I am talking about streetscape design
Yeah.
The X.
that isn't same. It has a
Not like
number of
housing.
design styles and shapes that would meet a community of our size.
We wouldn't get a place like the council to do that.
We work with, that's the difference.
Thank
We
you.
work with you.
And you know, maybe just to round this part of it up, you know, it's the beginning of a process. We don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
We've put out the intent. We've been delighted to get to know Charles and his team with a really strong group of people and experiences that we think can benefit. And as I said at the start, I think we can, you know, our ambition will be, this is just getting it going, the relationship, and you can have a direct relationship with Charles and his team and engage with them, what's needed in the community.
I reckon it'd be brilliant if you for the Valley of the Village, there's a lot of vacant land.
There's so many opportunities. Yeah, we're really excited to start into this.
Fantastic.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Is that then the time? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, is more questions or
Yeah, we'll
move to the questions?
Sure.
Sure.
So I might just, I talked to Gary that.
And Joe, I need some help from you on numbering.
As I noted earlier in the meeting, there was a number of meetings before where we didn't get the questions, and
Yes.
you have responded in this one with some of the December questions, but I think today we just focus on the March, because otherwise we'll be here for 24 hours.
Thank
So
you.
March is fairly brief, so if we just run through them, if that's okay. In terms of the ones I submitted to the community, the first one was the wind tower impact on health. And at the December meeting, Stromlo representatives advised wind towers have no impact on health. No physiological impact, further stating this information is causing the health impact. Stromlo Tag representatives also stated that the Pines project, no, let me finish, Pines project will comply with current noise regulations.
Yes.
So then there was, in my question, there's a little bit more detail there. I've seen the question that you put back in your paper here and the response, but your response hasn't answered the 5 questions that were asked. There's no answer, and the questions were, and I'll read them out, you might want to, are you relying solely on compliance to regulations that exclude infrasound sound, low frequency noise, and do not include the entirety of the sound environment, for example, pulsing characteristics? Do you acknowledge that current noise regulations do not fully account for the entire sound landscape, including infrasound, low frequency noise and their impacts? If residents experience documented health impacts, while you remain technically compliant, do you accept responsibility? What will you do to mitigate and take seriously reports of ill health? And lastly, what binding mitigation, operational adjustment or compensation mechanisms will be in place? Before I ask you to answer those, I come to the point at hand. There are now a number of cases that have been before the courts where there's been cases found against councils because of nuisance value, which has been found correct, being health impacts. Okay, so there's a number, well, I can read the cases out to you if you want.
Yeah, I think you're,
Well, I thought you would know these cases.
well, I don't know them.
Falls one, but anyway, there's a number of cases. They've been very expensive to councils, both in legal and also in research. Councils have a responsibility. I think with you not even considering these issues, we're at great risk with this matter, going on the experience of other councils in other jurisdictions now being sued. Okay? That's it.
Okay. I think the answer is the same as we gave last time. We work within the planning guidelines and the scientific, which is informed by the scientific knowledge. I don't, with respect, I don't accept everything you've stated that we said.
Well, you did. That's on the record. It's on the.
We can only work within the guidelines that are given to us by the scientific community.
So if you do that, our council then is at risk.
Well, I think that's a matter for the council. That would be a matter for the council to take legal advice on. I don't believe that's the case, but I'm not.
Well, I'm not making an opinion. This is based on half a dozen cases that.
So I think you need to take legal advice on your position. I think that would be-
Just in relation to that, remember this would be a state significant development application.
Exactly, but the council has an obligation under the State Act to mitigate. I'll read it out. Okay.
I don't think it's a matter for us, is what I'm saying.
So under section 2125 of the Local Government Act, 125, Gary, council may abate a public nuisance or order a person responsible for a public nuisance to abate it. Nuisance being consists of interference with the enjoyment of public or private rights in a variety of ways. Nuisance is public if it materially affects the reasonable comfort, convenience and sufficient class of people to constitute the public or section of the public. For example, wrongful or negligent act or omission in the public road, in a road. But in terms, if someone's being damaged because they can't sleep, they will come to the council and say there's a nuisance. And then you will have to then, in these cases,
area.
Um,
from the wind tower.
happy to take
Okay,
that on notice
thank you.
to see what council's risks are, because council is risk averse.
Otherwise, we may be complaining about the cows.
No, these cases were about wind towers. Councillor Hayden,
I'm talking about the act,
not cows.
the act,
The act's here.
the act.
Councillors,
When you said that, what councillor kind of said is not a matter for you or the studies that have been taken. It's not a matter for you. Well, you guys are building the towers or proposing to destroy this district, and I can go on about it. You guys are that's what you're proposing, to destroy us to divide us by giving us, 150 things. It's just a bribe. You're just bribing the community. So I just want
back to information only, please.
Information only, okay, but
Please,
I just wanted to say it is not for you, what your comment was.
Like,
It is for you to, because you guys are building the towers.
so just for councillors, we will take that on notice, and as a council, we will do our due diligence in relation to that.
my statement is, just for clarity, my statement is clearly about the risks that council may or not be having. I'm not in a position to answer that, and that, with respect to Councillor Lee, that was my statement. It was, I can't give you legal advice, and so I can't respond in a way that might be being desired.
Well, what I'm saying, councillor Connor's stating, studies that have been done for the effects of the tower.
No, don't, no, this is court cases.
And what I'm saying is-
Still related to the effects.
Councillor,
You're relating to council, but I'm relating, okay.
Councillor, what I was saying is, in the previous meeting, Ag said there's no health impacts, but there's a series of cases saying there are health impacts. I'll send that information to Gary and for him to have a look at the risk.
Thank you.
So one of my questions, which I've looked at the responses, so it's great, thank you. But one of them, I think it's probably my terminology, I called it community benefit fund, but I was actually referring to the legacy,
Yes,
which is with
you had a
Glenn.
question earlier, yeah.
Yeah, so my question was, has the committee been formed? Does the committee include community members from both Oberon LGA and Bathurst LGA? So is that the plan, to get people from both of those LGAs for the legacy fund?
They're certainly welcome. Yeah, so Blaine has been administering and taking applications. We believe that continues to be open. I'll try to address the question that was raised earlier about, are we willing to work in a different way to involve council in that? So yes, is the short answer. We have a proposal based on some work we're doing at a project down west in Narendra, thank you, west of Oregon, where there's a reference group that's formed in order to distribute the voluntary, to discuss and agree and then recommend for the voluntary planning agreement, the funding that goes through that. And what we thought was, since that will, under the planning regulations, that group will exist, we might try and merge these two a little bit or have council involvement.
But the legacy fund is got separate and not mixed in with the voluntary, because we know
Yeah,
we're
that's
near a
correct.
voluntary planning agreement. So
That's correct.
what Glenn is heading up
Yes,
is the legacy fund. And
correct.
so my question relates more around, so you've got two LGAs involved
Yes.
in this because of Junkie Creek sitting in Bathurst.
Oh, yes.
Do you have an equitable split of that money? Is it gonna go 80?
I think it makes entire sense to do that, and that's what Glenn's team will be doing.
Yeah, okay. And then I suppose what governance is in place to ensure the management of this fund will be transparent and special interest groups do not hijack the funds? So again,
I guess.
I don't
by
know
having
who
a
the
broad-
people are
Yeah,
and what their
no.
qualifications are going to be, but there must be a
At the
process.
moment, we're trying to constitute that group,
Mhm.
and I think transparency, well, if you look at Glenn's credentials to start with, I think we've got an amazing community member leading that. And certainly, if you look at what we're trying to do as a business and bring innovation and community benefits, I think you'll probably find there's great governance there. We do it all around the country. There's nothing particularly special about what we're trying to achieve here, in the sense of governance sense.
It's such a
Right.
big pot of money. You would expect that the project that would be having funds allocated would be really major project, not tiddlywinks of,
Yeah, that's
1,000
certainly
here,
our hope.
2,000 there,
Yeah.
because you already do that.
Yeah.
So again, it's sort of like, is that the idea behind it? So they're like $1 million projects?
That's what the group comes up with as the best use of that fund, is the thinking behind that. Yeah, that's the intent. We didn't want to be too prescriptive at the start. And by having community members and a strong community member leading it, we hope to we know we'll get the governance.
Right, so over time, this is going to appear on your website, so we'll know how it's developing, who's on it.
Yep, the applications, all that.
Yeah, we'll do that. But,
That's a very good addition, actually.
yeah, a little bit more transparency around how
Thank you.
it's been formed, who are the people,
Yeah.
and people will know them because of
Yeah, of course.
our community.
Yeah.
And then the sort of projects that would be considered.
What a great idea. That we can make
Andrew,
space.
just a follow up to that, timeline on spend,
Ah, um,
is there a timeline? So
Yeah,
if the project is
100%.
considered
all of
good
the,
enough, so
all
like
of
it just
the-
keeps rolling over, or is there a timeline where
no,
you're saying we want this spent in the community before we lodge an application, or what's the?
yeah, but those are material investments in community benefits. Those benefits flow from the project. So when the project is real, just like the community housing thing, when we start the community housing, all of that flows, including the legacy fund. We've been quite innovative in offering the $100 electricity rebate to the community at this point in time. But that's a modest investment compared to the legacy fund. So post financial close at the first stage of the wind farm, we'd roll it out. And we haven't descriptive about, is it the first year, is it 2 years, and heavy. Noting it's only actually a small portion of the overall community spend from the project. It's one we wanted to add to the project and make use of more reference group.
There's a question that last meeting, our mayor spoke to and about for over 40 minutes, or assisted with yourselves, the neighbourhood agreement, the fact that the 105-year term in the host agreement wasn't replicated in the neighbour agreement. So anyone with a neighbour agreement who signed and received wouldn't have been aware until recently, thanks to our mayor, that the potential was that it was for 105 years. So the $5,000 upfront payment was for 105 years potentially. And then it was just the knowledge of how long this was going to go for. So just going on with that, because I think
I don't accept all that, but keep
I just think the mayor would like me to further pursue that, because in the answer you're given, it doesn't really answer. So just before we go there, just so I can get my head around, so tag number 5, Roger Limited, is the developer, is the company on both the host and the neighbourhood agreement. Is that right?
Sure.
Tag
Can I
number
ask what question this is on the list?
5, under neighbourhood agreements.
Over 6.
And then we on the.
No, I'm just asking you now,
Ah,
so I can get, because the neighbourhood agreement is dependent on the host agreement. I was just asking a simple question, is tag number 5? I've seen the neighbour agreement, it's tag number 5. I was just saying, is tag number 5 also on the,
what, is this a council matter?
it is, no, it's a matter for our neighbours, our community members signing up to a neighbour agreement. I'll get to the chase in a minute if you just answer the question. So, right, so I assume it's number 5 as well. So number 5 would then be owned, I presume, by Tag Energy, being the foreign company, or a link to there. So tag number 5 is the developer. Would it be a $2 company? Okay. Anyway, and if it is, let me finish. If it is, if this is the way it's put together, I know you're not, are guarantees provided by Tag Energy to cover any liabilities of tag number 5? If something happens, who's going to carry the can? They're in that neighbourhood agreement. You know, if there's people there who've signed and weren't aware of 105 years and want to sue someone, who's carrying the can? Is Tag Energy providing guarantees?
I'm more than happy to answer this, but you'll have to give me just a moment to take you through it.
Yeah.
So any large infrastructure project like this will be developed in a project company. And that's an efficiency of accounting to some extent. And, and large projects over a long lifetime can also change ownership. So it's a tool to be able to change ownership. The costs, the liabilities, all of the agreements associated with the large infrastructure ultimately wind up into that, what's sometimes called a special purpose vehicle. Yeah. And we as a developer and owner at the top own that 100% at this point. Yeah. And so as the project gets towards financial close, all of the contracts associated with it, the leases, the neighbor agreements, the revenue agreements, maybe with our customers, the contracts to build it, contracts to borrow money, all sit in that vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if there's any troubles down in the structure below it.
No, in that one, that's the developer. That's where.
Yeah, they would only have trouble if, for example,
Decommissioning.
you name it, correct?
If they,
Whatever.
if decommissioning, you propose to fund it down the track, not up front. So say there was an issue 10 years down the
May I
track.
finish?
Okay.
May I finish? So that vehicle holds both the benefits of the revenues
Yeah.
and the obligations of things like the leases.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, and like any business, in the order of risk, first thing revenues go to are the leaseholders. So the very first people that get paid are those that are in the lease, and then also the people maintaining, then the bank debt. And then the last person to get paid is the equity, the owners.
Absolutely.
Now, I think to answer your question is all of that, and this is very standard. There's no, unfortunately, there's not, or fortunately, there's no trickery. There's nothing special.
Absolutely.
Happy to take you through this. It's a very standard project structure that provides protection for all involved, including the leaseholders.
But that's where the risk is sheeted home to us.
Okay.
Because if
I
explain-
don't
let me explain-
understand that, but
Let me
I'd like
explain,
to.
just the one simple thing with
Yeah.
decommissioning. Project's finished. Say you're reading between the lines,
Yeah.
we start funding it in year 15, 20 or something. Right, we're not gonna put the money up front because you've
So
said
it's the
you're not
decommissioning question.
decommissioning the bond. No, this is about risk. So we don't have the money up front. Our community don't have the money up front. The host doesn't have the money
Yeah,
up front.
you're getting closer there, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so that's what we've been arguing, that we'd like a bond up front. We'd like forestry to get a bond up front now, because there's no bond, in that first 15 years, there's a contingent liability if something went pear-shaped, like it did with the solar farm in the Central West, where the developers walked away and left the landowner to clean up the mess. And what I'm saying is, there's no underwriting of those liabilities, but if you would have put the money up front as a bond, there wouldn't need to be any underwriting. But because that's not up front, we need underwriting.
Can I ask, who was negotiating, who am I speaking to? Am I speaking to a landowner or a councillor?
I'm talking on behalf of, if you want forestry,
Forestry.
or on behalf
I would suggest forestry.
A landowner.
Forestry and
A
we need
host.
forestry.
well, keep it simple, a host, I'm a farmer.
Yeah, so we provide money for those landowners to get their own private representation.
Absolutely, it's
And that is the primary protection for those landowners.
$2,500 for legal advice.
That's the neighbor agreements, right? It's it's a form agreement. There's not much change.
But if shit hits the fan like that Central
Yeah.
West solar
Can
farm,
can I just,
and the property owner
ma-
then is left on his own to clean up the mess.
so the Central West Solar Farm, if you want to refer to that one. So it's an experimental technology. Very interesting experimental technology from Vast Solar. It's not, the modules you see around on the,
Yeah.
the billions that are being produced at the moment around the world. It was a concentrating with mirrors, concentrating heat to a heat receptor, going through a steam turbine, and unfortunately, that technology hasn't proved to be economic. Yeah. So that experimental technology has gone into liquidation. I don't know who owns the land, but you're quite right to say the landowner is responsible. I'm guessing it's actually the project vehicle that I spoke of earlier, because normally you wouldn't lease the land for such a thing. It occupies all of it, unlike a wind farm. So to reference that, it's a very important thing that the industry or the receivers for that company get it right. But I guess it would be quite a different situation for what's a commercial wind farm or a commercial solar farm, normal technology.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep things simple here.
Yeah, no, but
A senior official in the Department of Planning has said 6 months ago, landowners, that's where the buck stops.
And that's New South Wales.
Chris Mintz came out the other day and said, the buck stops with landowners.
He was right.
It's just, I'm being very simple.
Yeah.
If the wind tower goes bad and you're not underwriting that liability and there's no bond up front, the buck stops with the host.
Correct. And what we do, and I have to, is you have to be willing to hear this is what happens in the entire industry. The industry, if you're building a commercial wind farm, it's normal technology, unlikely to fail. It's very, very standard stuff. The revenue stream starts and it pretty much goes for 20 years plus. Even the early examples of wind farms were producing that. So the reality is, in those early years, the risk of that happening is very, very low, that it doesn't require the inefficiency and the cost burden on electricity users to unnecessarily do what you're suggesting. What you're suggesting increases the cost of electricity.
Yeah.
There's no examples of solar farms that are traditional technology and also wind farms failing in those early years And that's why the industry and all of those private law firms that represent our hosts, including the private law firm that represent forestry, we strike commercially sensible agreements between the parties that balance the risk and the cost. And just one more point. If we were to put, for example, all of those bonds in place at the front that you're talking about, we did that, we could offer less revenue to our hosts to insulate them against the effects of climate change and variable weather on their farms.
Less risk then, so
It's, money doesn't come from.
Clean Energy Council, that's your group of developers. They say, let's pay it towards the end.
They have nothing to do with the,
Yeah, so
The Australian Energy and Infrastructure Commissioner says we need it up front. Our DCP said up front.
our
DCP.
The AEIC does not say that.
No, but
He doesn't.
But our DCP says up front. And sure, look, and when you say we'll pay in the last 5 years, the risk, who's bearing that will last 10 years?
I didn't say that either.
All right, but that's what's being proposed. Where's the risk? I mean, all I was asking is who's underwriting it during that period? And there's no one underwriting it. Anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you.
I think for the last one.
Yep.
I think the last one. I just wanted to say, at the last meeting, I asked a question regarding a private meeting that councillor Hayden set up with you and a private. Not you,
Stromlo.
Stromlo.
Yeah.
And I subsequently
Yes.
didn't follow up email, and I've now got the answer.
Thank you.
But all I'd just like to say is I was concerned
Yes.
that this has been arranged, and this is not how we see TAG or Stromlo normally can conduct themselves. Like, you wouldn't go and have, I've never seen you do it, you've done some very good community
Yeah,
engagement.
Thank you.
And I just felt that was sort of, it wasn't a good look, you know, because I've raised it. And it just compromises the integrity of both TAG and Stromlo. And I was just hoping that it wouldn't happen again.
Thank you.
Because you do know, you're very up to speed with projects and how they work and how you work with council and council laws and the requirements around not just one person being a council representative like a GM or somebody. It's all it is. It was just.
And that's our takeaway from it. We've indeed taken your comments very seriously.
Yeah.
I think at the time it was done in good faith by those involved.
Mhm.
I've investigated myself and I'm very comfortable if that's the case and the email trails and everything. And what we've taken away from it is we'll, always, if it's not done in the first instance, we'll make sure to flag it and copy the mayor and the general manager on any such comms.
and I just want to add something to that because I was the councillor that this keeps getting drawn up about. It is a councillor's role within the community. If members of the public need to consult with anyone, it is a councillor's role to help assist that. There were other parties present. Thank you,
I think you're taking my point around how you conduct yourself.
Yeah, I think we can all learn a little bit.
Exactly. And I think that you have today, and I just like to see it continue.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Well, it's a little bit the same with the issue around Trunky Creek. One of our councillors consistently saying it's not going to Trunky Creek. You yourself, excuse me, councillor, you yourself have said in terms of the community benefit fund, there'll be an amount there for that Trunky Creek area. There's been 7 neighbourhood deeds go out to Trunky Creek landowners. There's been 3 meetings. You are looking at the Trunky Creek area.
Made a public statement about the extent of the wind farm, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So the other question I had was, there's a couple of brief ones, if you don't mind. Inland Renewable Energy Region. That was a fascinating article. And if you saw that, 6 renewable developers have pitched the idea that inland renewable energy regions, where they claim the remoteness of the region and sparsity of population will result in less development barriers. It's just, to me, I know people out in the northwest New South Wales and the Hay Plains, and you talk to them, the wind farm development goes up on one farm only, 20, 30,000 acre farm. You're not dealing with multiple owners. There's no angst there. You can't even see them. And that's what these 6, then they're big developers. There's Squadron Energy. There's all the big ones are saying, hey, I think it might be time to go out west because there's just too much crap happening here, right? So that was a really good one. I hope maybe you might join that group. Another one, Tag Energy Research, and I won't go there. Trunky Creek, the wind turbine life was interesting. This has got me, it's got me a little bit ahead of the spin. So there's the Pines Wind Farm host contracts are for 35 years. Recent studies of wind tower age and performance by Danish Energy Agency and Edinburgh University, based on 350 wind farms, not towers, found that towers larger than 2 megawatts onshore turbines, there's an age-related decline of 4.5%, which means by age 16, they're only 63% efficient. And being an accountant, I'd go, well, if they're 63% efficient, they're going to be replaced pretty soon, which means anyone signing an agreement for a host or a labour agreement can anticipate that turbine certainly not being there for 35 years. By 35 years, it's 15% efficient. Like, so I just like, and your thought, your comments there say that, you know, it's beyond your scope to comment. I think that's basically what you're saying. But
Well,
really,
on the
we need to be
on the
upfront.
study, yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
what
we
I
need to
can-
be upfront with our community members that when if they put a tower on their place, because they're 300 metres, they're big ones, when they're small, they haven't got such a rapid life decline. When they're huge, there's more turnover, more issues. So we just need to, you know, monitor that.
Maybe what I can point to for you, and, you know, not commenting on that study, but, you know, as one international investor in these things, we've just invested nearly $4 billion in our project in Victoria on the basis of the technology. In that, about half of it comes from banks, half of it comes from equity. And all of those investments are made on the basis of confidence in the technology. It's not novel technology, it's well developed. I worked in that industry myself for a decade, you know, as an OEM building them. I've been to the factories, I see the science. I have no reservations whatsoever on the technology, and you know, I think there's better things we all could investigate about how to make more benefits for the Oberon community versus the investment risks that equity investors are taking on technology.
No,
Right, I think what I'm focused on is how do I bring enough benefits to this community
But having said that, what I mean,
that
I know you're
addresses
looking
the
at
issues you have for
I know you're looking at that side of the ledger, but our side of the ledger is if they're replaced twice during 35 years.
which they won't be.
But if they are, based
They
on
won't
this,
be.
our roads, our infrastructure,
Yeah, it's just wrong
The
information
neighbours-
you're dealing with.
well, I'll send you a copy of it.
Yeah, no, it's not the industry. There's billions
Two
of dollars, there's billions of dollars going into the industry right now on the basis that the.
These are the first time 300 metre towers have been in Australia, so I'm only basing it on research. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I look to where the money's going.
Yeah, of
Trust the
course.
With that being said, I think they're the questions that were lodged.
Yeah.
Any further ones, please direct them towards TAG's website. I encourage the community to do the same, to try and keep up to date with as much information as you possibly can in relation to this. Just a quick one. Progression on your EIS, are we timelines still remaining the same as what they were?
They have been requesting rescoping.
Yeah, so we're looking to still
I'm
submit.
talking about timelines, council, that were lodged, that were previously provided by TAG in regards to, like the third quarter, like we haven't put a date on them, but we certainly are working towards quarters.
Late 2027 for the EIS.
So it's same as what we provided before.
Critical path is finishing the bird bath utilization surveys. And then some engineering and study work past that, then submission. And so earlier, Joanna mentioned we're a quarter of the way through that. And that leads to mid-27, late 27.
Happy that those studies are happening. Be really interested to see what your transport routes are starting to look like. That those types of things are things that community are really interested in. They want to have it. They want to deep dive into those things.
Sorry, Gary, I did have one late question. O'Connell, community member. They just want me to ask Andrew
Yes.
to ensure that, ask him that to ensure us, ensure the O'Connell community that no trucks will be going through the Anzac Memorial.
What I said last time holds, we will not harm the uncalled trees.
No.
Very simple. Well, I tried it.
Okay.
So,
Trucks are various sizes and shapes, so I can't obviously make that statement. But what I can say is, we will not harm those trees.
Well, we've seen a, AI thing of it, the trucks going through and it's showing you damaging the trees, so.
That's not our project.
I know, I realise that, but if you've got the same towers and they're bigger, supposedly bigger.
And
So,
it's an issue we're very live to.
You don't touch and play with a memorial.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a memorial, you don't put a coat of paint on it.
Sorry, I probably went down a rabbit. Lauren, I wasn't meant to go. What I'm trying to say is that early information in this regard is paramount to us. It is paramount to a community
Yes.
who's trying to work with an understanding about what is happening and what is proposed. This is a huge thing for our community, and I'm encouraging, I know I can't force it, but I'm encouraging early intervention and conversation with our community in that regard. So with that being said, thank you, councillors, for your attendance. Thank you, Tag. Thank you, Blue Chip. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everyone who's attended today. Thank you for the community who stuck around and listened to the whole hour and 15 minutes. Appreciate it as always, and look forward to the next 3 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.